Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to a new course of building systems. Right now, almost the whole class is logged in. As you know, you're not required to have your video on, as I put in Blackboard. So we have less data running, and probably the system goes smoother. In the cover, you have a photo of a Real Madrid stadium in Madrid. This just 1 month ago, one of the craziest constructions I have ever seen. So today we will go into the introduction of the course. Even though it's mandatory, some of you will decide if continuing or just taking it sometime later after you know how the course is organized and the basic contents. Tomorrow, we'll have a bit more detailed introduction. And next week, we'll start seriously with the full program of the course. So we'll have just a soft first 2 days, and then we will go straight into hard work. So today, although I think most of you already know me enough, I have to self-introduce me. I will go into the objectives and contents of the course, which if you went to the syllabus, you will know already. And then I think interesting, more practical to see how the classroom is organized, which still we don't know well, and how the grading is done. So you can calculate, well, you can make your plans to have the grade as you plan for this course. Let's start with myself. I will go fast. This lovely guy in the photo is myself. The reading is Santiago Porras Alvarez, which is long name. But actually in Spain, we have the name of the dad and the mom, which is quite nice, quite considerate with women, I think. This is the closest I can write in Korean. Actually, I have a workaround, but they don't fit well in the formal use of Hangul. Santiago Porras Alvarez is, well, okay, but Santiago is the closest. And in Korean, just Santiago, right? We can make shorter. I'm the only Santiago in the whole Korea University, which is quite convenient for me. And if you want to have the good pronunciation, is the Tia. Yeah, actually it should be like a Tia or long A, right? Not Santiago, but Santiago, if you want to have it right. Otherwise, as you like. And I told already, Santiago comes from 2 words, Sanctus and Jacobus, Jacob, which actually is Saint Jacob, right? All together. This is very unique of Spanish and Portuguese, I think. And Sanctus in Chinese as the letter of song in Korean. And this is the Chinese character I use in my seal, my tochang, when we have assignments on paper. Still, people keep coming. I know that the network is not perfect, and you need sometimes to re-log in, that's unavoidable, but please be on time, especially in these online sessions. Offline is also disturbing, but come on, online, you only need to log in and put your computer. You don't need to get a bus, the subway, you need to move usually. So getting on time is much easier. So please make an effort as a consideration to all other people listening to the lecture. So let's continue. So please call me just a professor if it's too difficult, or Professor Santiago. Try not to be too informal, especially on campus, right? Don't call me, hey, Santiago, things like that, because it sounds terrible, even if you use English. About my education, in the background, grade is my school. Architecture is a full college, not a department, in Spain, in Madrid. Well, in Spain, but the photo is from Madrid, my school. It's a building built in 1936, I think. It's almost 100 years old. I'm on the older side of life already. I graduated in 1985. And I followed a 6-year program. There's no choice of a master. So the degree I have was equivalent to our school's master architect and master engineer, the civil engineer, right? or construction engineer, if you want to say. There was no choice at that time. The following year, I got my registration. That was an advantage of this kind of very heavy program. So it's already 36 years. The following year, I went to Tokyo University for 2 years. There, I learned the language. So my Japanese is much, much better than my Korean. And I got my doctoral degree in 1992. Is engineering on architecture. I keep the engineering not because I feel as an engineer. I'm just an architect at heart, but it helps me to have some standpoint against the proud and the arrogant engineers around. So since that time, I have been practicing architecture in my office and started teaching in Korea 14 years ago, almost, Sungkyunkwan. And I have been teaching in Korea University already for almost 10 years. And this is why you see me here. If you want to reach me, my office is in Innovation Building. What you see in the background is just an illustration. This is another working space I share in Central Seoul, not here at the school. But I'm now in my office in Engineering Building, Innovation Building 89A. I spend a lot of time here at the office, but if you want to meet me, please call me and I will be happy to find a moment to meet you. You can reach me by email, which by the way is in the syllabus, and the syllabus is in the portal, so you don't need to ask. And it's very easy to remember if you know my name. You have also my office phone number, but in 10 years, I think I had just 3 phone calls and nobody replied. So better reach me in my cell phone, which has been the same for already quite a few years, and it will be easier. Our teaching assistant on the Photos construction site in Madrid, which you see a set of piles, which probably go much further. Probably it's like a 1:2 proportion, right? To support the excavation. And this is kind of a bracing in diagonal to support those walls during the excavation. And this is waffle slab just being prepared. And somebody coming to the door. Chang Jae-jun, nice name. I think he came in. So still 2 people missing into the class. Jae-jun, welcome to the class. Please try to be on time next time. Welcome to the class. So our teaching assistant is Ji-won Park, or Park Ji-won, a very able student in the laboratory of Professor Lee Kwan-ho. And you have her email and telephone number. So for any kind of administration, attendance, paperwork, and things like that, not purely related to the lessons, you can contact her and she will be very efficient with whichever problem you have. So let's go straight into the course. What do you want to do out of this? So the course has like 2 phases. Not surprisingly, we have a theory basis, right? Which is mostly a review. And I'm sorry to say we are 5th year, but we are very much in the basics yet. Yeah. To go into advanced things, we will try to build over what we saw in materials, of course. And it is the same professor teaching the same subject. So there's some kind of overlap that's unavoidable. But we will try to go 1 step further, right? Into difficulty, into complexity, but whatever is a review. And this is a theory course in principle, so it's not hard to understand. But I think more important is the practical side. Ideally, this should be kind of a studio of designing architectural systems, or really applying them to your project, to your design. Well, I would say more like integrating, which is the word which now we use, right? Integrating. But of course, we have already a lot of effort in Design Studio, so we cannot go so far. But ideally, this is a complement to your Design Studio, like a support course, right? And if we are not able to see the connection between design and that theory, we are wasting our time. So the most important, more than really acquiring more data, more information, is having that mental process of connecting that theory with your own design process, right? So, and when I speak of process, is the whole process, right? From concept to the end. Not just something you add, which is the opposite of integrating, right? Like add-ons, which is like the most usual. If this is clear, I hope. If it is not, you can put all the questions you want in the chat. Usually if the questions are on the point, I saw somebody just saying, sorry, that's okay, I accept it. So don't worry, it's the first class and we have to warm up. But any question which goes in the chat and is in the point, I try to explain on the go. So I said, if you understand this, we don't need to continue with the class. But since we still have 1 hour left, let's continue. Theory is mostly in the books, right? And this is really old books, important ones. Magazines, internet, right? All together, not just internet. That talk that everything is in internet so far is kind of a myth. It's not true. There's many things which are not yet there. And they're pretty disorganized. So books are the first reference. Internet is mostly about bits of information, not really knowledge. And practice. And you know, we are in architecture school. The photo is borrowed from, I don't know if some of you are in the class now. It's borrowed from the UAUS team last semester. They were working in spring, right? And the final setting was done at the end of summer. So except for those few events in which you can make one pavilion or you may do some internship, in architecture school, we have almost not practice, which is a big problem. And practice is not making the project. Practice means making the building, which we cannot do. Compare architecture with medical school, for example. In medical school, you go to hospital and you participate in patient treatment, diagnose, and even in surgery, right? You get trained in the real battlefield. If you go to art school, you make your paintings, real sculptures. So you finish the object. In architecture, we just make the plan for one project, for one building, right? So this is a limitation we have. Without that real practice, it is very hard to know how much you can push that design and what you need to include in those drawings, those models, which will help to make this building as you really have in your mind. This is a limitation of our subject, of our major, and we have to be aware of it, right? So practice is just a practice. What we can do at school, just a simulation of what would be the real world. Let's go into the objectives. What specifically, what do we want to do? And this is my ideal. As I said, this course is mostly a support for the graduation project. If you're not doing graduation project, that's okay. It could be a support for any project you are doing or you did, right? So important thing is to apply the knowledge, that technical knowledge in a real project. Well, not that real, all projects are real, but it's not real is the construction, right? Importantly is to be creative and integrated, right? This is why I put a design concept. Systems, structures, ventilation, everything is part of the design. It's not something that somebody else totally alien to the project adds and the fits and stuffs in some way. And creative is not just a copying and pasting, which is quite usual, but in any kind of project, even if you try to be the most standard construction, you have to adapt to specific circumstances, and that adapting means changing, tweaking the standards, and that calls for some creativity. And you can be only creative when you understand the basics. Otherwise, you just copy and just hope that works because somebody else did and it worked for somebody else. That's not very professional way of doing things. As you said, there's a theoretical and practical. And if we can, and really I hope we can this time, they will try to visit 1 or 2 construction sites, which really helps to visualize and to see the reality of the things we see just in the slides and in drawings. If we go to the bureaucratic part, and this is why the course is this, the course had some SPCs assigned. We kind of fixed things, but I inherited this course. I didn't design, well, this is my course, of course, and I made it. But the course was set before I took it, right? Like 10 years ago. And the basics are just complying with SPCs. And we have a sustainability, which is important. And it is a bit sad that our department still takes sustainability as something kind of side subject, not really important thing. That is changing, of course. But right now, sustainability is something which we do not only apply to architecture. It's something which everybody expect we expand to our full spectrum of life, right? We have to live sustainably, in a sustainable way, I mean. And any competition, and most clients will demand that to be part of your project. So within the limitations we have to address this issue. System integration, probably the core, right? The integration, as I said, it's the key word. Just to make sure those technical systems are natural part of the project, as in our body, our bones and our insides and our muscles and our skin are a natural part of our body. It's not something we have like a orthopedic exoskeleton or things like that, right? And unfortunately, this is not always the case, right? And well, this photo is extreme. This is some back street in Jongno area. And it's just the opposite of integration, just applying things in a way that it is a miracle there's not any disaster happening there, because many things are against the basic rules of safety. Curiously, this being the core of the course, I just was able to convince the department to include this SPC in our course, which for me it was kind of obvious. Structural system, nothing to explain, that's obvious, we need the structures. In the photo, you have the structure of a Lotte department store next to the Lotte New World Tower. And we will not go into the theories because we don't have time. It is not a course on structures. We will try to be more specific on how they are applied to design. So which kind of understanding, which kind of decisions you can take in terms of designing the structure to fit your project, not to fight with your project. It's often, you see, we fight, we make a project, and that happens to everybody. And then we have to think the structure and things are destroyed. And this happens because that lack of integration, that kind of inclusion of that concept from the beginning of the design process. Environmental control systems. In purpose, I brought the interior of one of the Renaissance cathedrals in the southern Spain, because we think it is all about air conditioned and heating, and the systems can be 100% passive in this case, right? It's about having the proper light, sound, and temperature in the interiors. And we often forget about light because we have artificial light, and sound because I don't know, some people say architects must be deaf because we don't take acoustics into the consideration. Whatever, the environmental control is obviously one part of the systems, technical systems. And the first most important element to control this environment, this first barrier, is the envelope, right? The facade, the roof. And this is why we will spend a lot of time in that envelope part, because then the active systems, which is the next SPC, the service systems, something we apply afterwards just to complement what the passive systems cannot guarantee. And you know, next semester is accreditation inspection. So we have to be careful with the low performing SPCs, of which two affect our course. One is 12, which is actually is not specifically included, but it's part of the safety, is part of the service systems, can say. And I will not translate. Most of the class are fluent in Korean. Just apologies to our exchange student. We have one exchange student. I didn't check the list. Probably is logged in. I'm just checking, but too many names to. Okay, cannot say. Whatever. Yes, Angela. Angela. Okay, Angela, welcome. So that means that safety is not seriously carried on. And the other is the building systems integration. This is why I insisted so much to be conscious, to be aware of this SPC. Right. In which they say, okay, it is apparently well taught in this course, but not seriously applied in design, I guess. And I will call the attention of SPC 12, right, safety and protection. I will make it briefly, but we failed that so many times. And as architects, not only as architects, as a purely human beings, spending most of our life in buildings and towers, especially here in Korea, where high rise is so pervasive, designing correctly may avoid many of those disasters. It's the famous Grenfell Tower in Chelsea, where many people died because of bad design, bad safety planning, bad material choice, and well, unfortunately, people didn't know very well what to do, right? But there was a huge responsibility of people planning, designing those buildings in this kind of disasters. And disasters happen more often than you may think. If you go to the homepage of the Seoul Firemen or Seoul Fire Protection Organization, fires in Seoul are in the thousands per year, several per day, right? Some of them are disastrous. And even if you do not design buildings, as a user, you have to be aware of the safety, so you may use your building in a safe way, right? Let's continue. That is the summary of the SPCs, which means we are related to 6 SPCs, 6, right? In a full spectrum of just 26, which is a lot for just one theory course. So this is demonstrating the summarizing and reviewing character of this course, right? It is crazy to think we can teach and you can learn from zero all those basics, but it is quite realistic. You can review and you can just say organize better in your mind those bits of information you got already in other courses. So I know that we are very critical about those SPCs, and this is one critic, actually isn't my words, but it's listening to you, right? This is too much to do in one course, and it's too late because we're ending. And my reply is yes, I agree. Right? I didn't invent this course, but it is true that it's supposed to be a review. So I insist, thinking you know the basics, even if you forgot, whatever you studied once and you forgot, it's very easy to recover, right, with some basic reviewing. So it's basically a review, right? And the basics, anybody expects to have those basics from anybody who studied 5 years long program. Still, some schools especially Japanese schools, which produce Pritzker prizes and top architects all the time, right? Even though many people like to think Japan is in decadence and maybe in decadence, but in terms of architecture, they're still a reference country. Mostly they study 4 years, right? And they are quite competent in both design, drawing, graphics, and the technical things, right? And anybody expects that. And if we study 5 years, people expect more. Your seniors, I got some kind of fun critic, very, very angry guy. I don't know who was it, but it's like a laughable thing, right? Why? Because the SPC is supposed to make kind of raising the level of Korean education to the international standards. So things, the titles, the degrees can be recognized. And often, if you go to study in Europe, right, you have to start from second year. Well, I saw the case of starting from first year and having to start from zero because nothing was recognized because I started in Korea. Well, things have become better in 10 years time. The 10 years I have been here, things improved in terms of mutual recognition, in terms of the level of the teaching. But it is not because your degree is Korean. It is because when you go to one place, they just realize by watching your portfolio and your courses that there's not so much substance in there, right? So even in Korea, the license is much harder. Well, it depends on the countries, right, and the system. Nowhere is easy to get a license. But real practice, as we said before, we need everywhere. So Great Global in June is the accreditation, right? The accreditation. Well, accreditation is not totally global. Only the countries of the Canberra Accord recognize it, but it helps a lot, right? And I'm in contact with the Spanish schools and with the schools from Japan also. Not so much from the States, but actually they will move in the same level of, let's say, of the objectives. And in June, our accreditation never guarantees an automatic recognition of the degrees, but makes easier to reach for the equivalence. So that's a positive thing, I think. We hate bureaucracy, we hate paperwork. We live in a bureaucratic society. This is not democracy, it's like pure bureaucracy. Very extreme, but this is the world we have, right? And those accreditations, those quality controls, all is about just producing more and more paper and more forms. It has its dangers, because as this student criticized, paper means nothing. What is important is the reality, and it's very easy to fake things on paper and make look good, which is not good. But it's the world we have, so let's make the best out of it, and instead of just whining and complaining, improve it by criticizing, by polishing the system, which is something we do. We really, in 10 years, we tried to simplify as much as we could the paperwork within the possibilities of the accreditation. And if you're critical and you see the possibilities, we can improve it all together. And really, it helps, makes sense in the world we have nowadays. So let's see the course in context. This is the diagram we made a few years ago with almost the latest configuration. You know, the courses change a little bit year by year. They're not exactly the same, especially electives, but this is the basic backbone of the school, the basic organization. This is published in the school brochure, which I think the program, the Korean University Architectural Educational Program brochure, also, which should be emailed to all the students. If you don't have it, you might receive it soon. And also the yearbook, which is already published. And the yearbook is in the office. You can go to the office and ask for your copy, and you'll get it. So you will see that those kind of Korea University Crimson Color courses is all the design studios, which are all correlative. We have a total of 8 studios, including the first year basic studios. And they have like two kinds of course supporting. In theory, one is about typically called critical thinking. It's mostly history, planning, and urban planning, which actually urban should be more in the design side. And then all the technical courses on the other side, right? And then finally, in the later years, some complement for professional practice, which maybe some of you had before this class, the architectural design and practice class, right? Which I think starts at 9. So probably you're already tired. We'll try not to spend too much time on this. So building systems is exactly this course, right? And you will see that we have all the structure courses, right? 3 mandatory courses on structures, which means right now you should be experts. And building systems just collects all that knowledge. You have all the environmental planning, which is Professor Lee Van Ho, and this is why we treat environment. And then we have architectural materials and building construction, which for what I understand is mostly management. I wouldn't do that way, but okay, that's the school. I think if there's only management, should go into the professional practice, right? So this is actually not much teaching about how to build things or how to build in terms of design as applied to the project. But whatever, all architectural materials and construction comes into the building system. So building systems is kind of funnel. It's a course which collects and reviews all the technical things which do not happen in any other course. This is the only kind of node together with the Studio 8, right? At the end of the school, which is collecting everything you learned. And this is why this course is so much at the end and why it is so diverse and so complex in some way. I will go fast into the syllabus, and please be aware that syllabus is a provision. Year after year, the lesson numbers and lectures change a little bit, but the contents are mostly the same. But sometimes some years we have some difficulty in some areas and some go smoother. So there's more variations, but whatever. We have the first week, which is this week, today and tomorrow. And we have the introduction and the lecture 1 tomorrow. It's about mostly the systems and the architect and the engineers, right? To give some context to the lecture we'll see later. Then next week we will go into structures, which will be during at least 2 weeks. Then you see this sign. This is in the case we have, for whichever reason, to keep online, which I wish it's not the case. If we go online, the exam is divided in smaller bits because online exams are very cumbersome to do. If not, there's no reason we make the traditional long, beautiful exam on paper by hand, as always, in a classroom where we can see each other, and in which the ways of cheating and providing and avoiding those cheating is different than online, right? So probably a bit more relaxed than online. What I wanted to say, we will spend at least 4 weeks with envelope systems, right? It is not that they are more important. Structures are essential because without structures, the buildings collapse. And it's not nice. We have many news of collapses in the recent months. But envelope is like a really the basic element which protects us from the exterior, right? Gives the image we design with care, but also creates the interior environment we want. So week 8 is the exam. That lecture within the same exam day is in the case of online exams. Otherwise, if it's offline, we said we have to adjust a little bit, right? And then we need to spend a couple of weeks with, almost a couple of weeks with interior systems and interior environment. And then another 2 weeks with active systems, including fire protection. And then sustainability. Usually the exam goes, the material for the exam, ideally it goes to the lecture 17, 18, right? If we have just only one exam, we will agree how to do it. So we have all the materials we need for the exam without repeating too much things. Tentative test is for the case of being only online for the exams. Then we will have 2 weeks 2 weeks dealing with the sustainability at the end, because it's kind of conclusion. And then we look back at the structures and envelope and we see how this relates to sustainability, especially the design issues, which is something we see very briefly in materials. And here we will be a full week, 2 lectures, just trying to see how we can integrate that sustainability, which tools we have, which requirements we have in general, because again, it's just 2 lectures. And then the following week, we have just a couple of sessions in system integration, which is the theory, because in reality, the system integration should be learned through the lectures, but we need to go into that theory. And final 2 weeks, just review an exam. And in the end, we have just a final submission, right? So we make some assignment, which probably starts after midterm. So assignment, which I call assignment 2, which is the one applying the systems to your project, goes from the midterm to the end, right? So you do little bits by week, usually it's 4 parts. And then with the feedback and the corrections you do, you make a clean final assignment, which goes instead of the final exam. And that's the course, that's all. Extras, what we can do, as we said, we will try to go to construction sites. Right. This is one of the last visits we did. It was not last one, but one of the last ones. Amore Pacific Construction, and it was quite interesting site. So people were quite hooked and very well explained by Hyundai, which was the company who did it. The assignments will be mostly bi-weekly. Every year I ask less and less. So forget about this, is change a little bit. We will do like 4 assignments on general systems issues, right? It's like exercises or practice on structures and envelope and so, and other 4 assignments on the assignment 2 on the design, right? Why do I do this? Last year, we tried to start with the assignment 2 with the own project from the beginning, but nobody had a project to work with. But especially for those doing Studio 7, hurry up, don't sleep, apply all your knowledge, concentrate, and do not keep sleeping. Just put your objective to have something already by midterm. So by the month of July, you have a design which you can show in the exhibition, right? Because Studio 8 is very difficult to continue and to do something. So that's the point. Probably 4 assignments before midterm and 4 assignments after. So this is like one assignment every roughly 2 weeks. This is examples of assignments Yoson did. Structure, this was about analyzing buildings. We don't do that anymore because of the, with the Corona, it was hard to make and organize those things. But okay, this is taking existing buildings and trying to explain how the structure works or how the envelope works, right? This case was Arco Museum in Hewa. Recovering details from publications, imagining them because you don't have all the information, and finding the strategies to show it in a clear way, more or less, right? And imagining this is a guess, because we don't have so much detail from existing buildings. So you have to go to your notes, reference materials, and try to guess which is the correct water drainage now, flat roof there, right? Most important, I think, is the assignment 2, application in the student's design. And this is totally individual. All assignments will be individual this semester. We will not make those complicated analyses. They were interesting, but we have the time we have and the energy we have. But this is most important, and I wish this would be the core. Actually, if you add the score for those 4 assignments week by week, plus the final presentation, it's a big percentage of the course. Most important. And the illustration is from one student who had always very not great scores in design. He really did not enjoy design, didn't understand why those drawings and those things made sense. But when he was asked to make the 1 to 50 model dealing with the details of the envelope structure and how the spaces are, he was so engaged, so hooked, because he could see things closer to the reality, that he became one model student. He became one of the top 10% of the, not the class, the school. He was able to study abroad, to have a nice result in graduate school, and work now in a nice office in the States, I think. So everybody has different abilities, but sometimes you discover what design, what architecture is about when you go out or beyond the abstraction of those very basic diagrams and those fancy renderings, which you make just one image of the outside, not really architecture. Important thing. And you see how people try to integrate the structure. So this is like a real project in which students see how to put the structure. One difficulty most of you have is to separate structure from envelope and other things. So always when you design a structure, you think on the structure alone, right? 2D dimension, and so on. So you see issues which do not work. All this red is my feedback. So all those things are elements which I don't understand what you are doing, what you are showing, or why things happen in some way, or is some issue you should fix, how to add clarity and things like that. Envelope is most important, and this is about graphic standards. By the way, if you make the full list of standards, you don't need to repeat it. As we said, the assignments are by hand. Well, we will say later. But working by hand, you have to be economical. You don't repeat things, right? You do things once. But this is a nice about collecting what we call a material schedule or material matrix or table about what you use in the building to systematize, or trying to see how one drawing of a glass box in cantilever for one building could work in reality to be built, right? MEP is the hardest for most, and hard to understand how it relates to design. And I show this because I saw this about 100 times already, right? And you have not to be confused. This is not about making some drawings to show and to look nice. Of course, everything you do should look nice, at least clear, right? So we can understand, and tidy. But copying a very complex drawing from one book, this is obviously copied from somewhere, and just putting it, I have this diagram for office building, for house building, for a commercial building, which doesn't make sense at all, right? And even so, the elements are not properly copied. This is clearly a ventilation duct. It is not plumbing system. And this is not electricity, it is clearly drainage pipe. You can see from far away. So this is not the project. This is one issue, and then no, it's not even properly copied. This is mostly useless. This is time consuming, and you learn very little or nothing. So it's not about this. It's about using the hand drawing just to think, to organize how those elements can be applied in your building. So this diagram is correct in itself. It is published, so it works. But it's not about copying it. It's about seeing how you can put it in your project and how this will affect the design, because those elements will take a space. You will need a shaft. You will need to have a ceiling, a suspended ceiling height. Those elements will show in the ceiling, and in the ceiling you may have lights and some kind of design. So all those things you have to take into account, right? It's not about just copying something which looks nice. This is most the case. So since you are working in your project, and this is quite correct, you print, right, the floor plan, and then you work by hand. You try to guess how to put, where to put the shafts, and how to collect the ducts, and how to organize it. And then you do by hand because you think faster. In the computer, you have to go to the final. When you know how things works, you can go to the computer. Computers ask for precision, for exactitude. And if you have to be precise, it is very hard to think. And you have to think how to put the ducts, which this doesn't work very well, right? So, but okay, you don't need to spend time redrawing the whole floor plan every time you try to do something. This is what some people do. And then obviously they say, this course is terrible because I spent so much time with assignments, but actually you need to spend just what is necessary, as you would do in your office when you're trying to think how to plan things to go to the engineer and try to agree how to organize it. Otherwise, the engineer will not listen to you, will put the pipes and the ducts where he wants, and you have a mess in general because it doesn't fit at all the project. Engineers do not worry at all about the design concept or design at all. And that's a problem for us, and a problem for the building, and a problem for the users of the building. But well, the point is work by hand, but in a way which is helping you to think, to process your understanding, not to waste time in useless tasks. This is also overdone. This could be a presentation drawing, but when you work with the small buildings, you have to detail more, right? And here you see things. Obviously, you will not put a duct crossing one elevator because the elevator will crash every time it goes up and down. Right? This is basic things you have to understand when you do things. This is the meaning of this kind of exercises, and then how you make the shaft right. So you should have an access from the common spaces, not from the houses. And there are pipes which are almost impossible to access. So when you design a shaft, you have to think on people using it. But still, this is something that at least helps you to understand that part is important, affects design, affects the interior spaces, affects the structure, of course. And you need some kind of logic. And it's better you, as an architect, control that logic than having a bunch of people doing their own way and having a small disaster in the building. Think that you're one, right? Or architecture office is one entity, but you will have the ventilation guys, the water plumbing guys, the elevator guys, the lighting guys, the interior. They're all different. The construction sites sometimes are like kind of war of every subcontractor, every engineer fighting for their own territory, right? Why do I say that? Well, that's reality, that's life. Anyhow, we will not demand too much about this, right? So this was had many problems, but there's a lot of work here, a lot of understanding gained from this exercise. So this had a nice score, right? It's about you thinking and understanding the importance and the influence of those systems in your design, not about making it perfect, because that will need more experience and more practice. But at least you know it exists and you have some exercise about it. Sustainability and integration usually work in diagrams, right? So integration means mostly show in a section all the systems. So you will show the structure, how it relates to the envelope, right? How you include the shafts or the pipes of ventilation, how you collect the water, and so on. So all the systems, we started by separate in different assignments. Now we put together, we can kind of show that they work well, they do not clash with the design, and they kind of work smoothly, and they in the end have a nice project. This is rotated, right? This was kind of A1 size, very large section. Sometimes it's okay if you copy details. This is obviously or probably copied from somewhere, but it is applied to the specific project, and it doesn't work completely. So there's many issues which the student should have worked, right? This is okay for a final presentation, not for one week by week, but it is nice to see people doing things with care and really, obviously in this case, enjoying what they are doing and being clear. Then the technical things can be corrected and improved, which this student did at the end. Integration diagrams, this is one tool we study at the end of the course. And then that's it. I did not show final assignments. I will do later after midterm, so you have a reference on what is the best and the basic and the worst, not the worst, but the lowest performance, right? But right now it's more about the concept, the idea, the purpose of this course. As a reference, we have our old loved book of Andrea de Plazes, Constructing Architecture, Materials, Processes, Structures, a handbook. This is the same book we used in materials in second year. I myself used the second edition, 2008, in English. Original is German, You have a translation in Korean of the first edition. I heard the translation is terrible. German is a difficult language to translate, even into English. And I can see many difficult translations, which I will comment in its due time. Probably in Korean is even more difficult, but whatever. You have the book at the library, I think the department's library, and probably also in the science library in our campus. And we have plenty of also copies in English, and we have even newer editions available. So what is good about this book? It is very practical. And it was about the basics, but you have very well organized the basics, and you have plenty of examples to see the endless variations you can get from those basics. So you have real projects and the theory. Right? And it's written by architects who really build, so they show their projects. I didn't find any book which is so wide and so well documented. It has problems, it has issues. Mostly this is a Swiss book, and Swiss are so precise building that it's very hard to extrapolate that into Korea, in which precision is not especially the main purpose of the construction. Is mostly fast, cheap, and good looking. That's the choice, right? So there's a class there, but it's quite good reference. Not perfect, but enough. If you really understand the whole book and the examples, you know already a lot. We will present much more bibliography, but there are 4 books I used most often. I think they're interesting, you may want to see. One is Salvatori is one of the legends in structures for architects. He was teaching, I think, Columbia University for a long time. So many of the books to calculate the structures and to understand the basics are from him. And I think we have copies at the library in English. It is translated to almost any language. And here's a very nice, this is general diffusion book about why buildings stand up, which I think is quite interesting, and it helps you to understand the why structures as they are, right? Not the intricacies of the calculation, which probably have to deal more with engineers. About sustainability, this is one I used a lot for reference, integrated design, which has sustainability and integration. It's great for us. It is very much of a textbook. It is quite wide, well organized, a little bit dated. It's already over 10 years, so technique has changed, but as a general concept, it's quite good reference, and you have copies in the library, I think. One classical building construction illustrated. Francis Chin is also a legend on graphics and architecture, and he illustrated almost everything you can think about architecture. Very good at drawing, and this about the general issues of construction. It's very well organized, very clear. You can see how the graphics are organized and explanations. Again, the same as the Plaza's book we saw in the previous slide is too much in the context of Swiss. This is very much in the context of the United States. And Korea is not United States. And if you're from other countries, probably nobody from the United States here, maybe our guest, our exchange student. So, but anyhow, it's very good example of the basic logics. And finally, the Building Systems Integration Handbook is not a book I love especially, but it is in the library. It has a huge lot of information. It's this thick, right? And it is the only serious book about what system integration is about, I found. Overkill, we will refer to it briefly in some lectures, but this is the basic bibliography I used, the most common. But there are plenty of the small articles and the home pages and books you will have in reference in other places. So about practical things classroom and grading, this was our classroom of very good students, probably the best year we had. And you see they are really enjoying the midterm exam. Let's take this out. The grading is in the syllabus. So it's like a 10% participation, 40% assignment. So you see participation and week by week work is half the course. The exam is 25% and final is 25%. But if you add final assignment with all the assignments, 65% of the whole course is on assignments. It's like a practical work, it's practicing, right? And it doesn't need to be overkill. It doesn't need to be too much work. It is 4 assignments, one every 2 weeks. And you will see that you have to think, right? You have to apply things, but this is all for the benefit of your project. The total is 100%, and I always like to have open scores, but in the end, they're always private. I don't know why, but I keep them kind of private. The grading criteria is something that interests. The relative grading is something which is very, very much assumed here, and it is quite open. So in general, up to 40% could be AA+, and then only the lower 10% should be necessarily C+ or lower. I think this works sometimes, but sometimes it's unfair. Sometimes we have very good groups in which nobody deserves a C+, or very few people, maybe not 10%. In our case, it would be like 6 people at least have to be C+ or lower. But sometimes we have very bad groups. Well, not bad, but some years are worse than others. I don't know why. And having somebody who has an A+, right, with a performance much worse than another guy who other year had a B+ with the same performance, I think is also unfair. So to avoid that, I always ask for a minimum absolute score. So it's kind of mixed, relative, right, and absolute. I'm flexible, so if you want to have an A+, you should have at least 90% of the score, right? And I lower the bar to the A. B+ is usually over average, so this may change, right? So the B with 70, which usually is C, right? You may have B and so on. And considering the difficulty for some of you, I lowered the bar to pass always to 50. I know that usually 60, but when considering all attendance and participation and assignments and hard work and performance, you can pass with very low grade. This is flexible, of course, but kind of worked quite well. And in 10 years, I didn't have much disagreement on this. And I think it's kind of fair. Classroom rules, and this is actually this is our classroom. I went just before the class, and the innovation building 203 is a nice class. It's about 80 seats, which is perfect for us because we don't need to be too much compressed, and we have windows and lights so we can open for ventilation. But obviously, when the spring comes and weather becomes warm, it seems energy goes down. So the rules, online, offline, of course, it's not the same, but important assignments, yeah, written graphic, always by hand. Of course, we might have, we did some things online, which you go to Blackboard and do a questionnaire and small exercise, that this is totally computer, right? Totally digital. But in general, we work by hand. I already explained with your Zombie exercises how you can do it to have it efficient and why it is by hand. And you just scan and upload, right? I will give links for uploading. Notes, if you take notes in class, which is a good practice, please do it by hand. Of course, at home, you do whatever you want. The second part, laptops, computers, tablets are not allowed. Well, this may change because probably if we go offline, it could make sense to do something online during the class, right? Go to Blackboard and do a small survey or small exercise online. So we don't need to move papers around, and the results are instantly filed. It has advantages and problems. Tomorrow probably, or Monday, I will make a survey on how you feel about it. But if you take notes by hand, now scientific studies have demonstrated that you really process more in your mind, and you get much better organization of that data in your mind. That's just trying to write by computer, in which just put spare letters and just replicate what you hear. The process is different, right? The punctuality, please try to start at the hour, right? And most important, if you have more than 12 assets or 12 or more, you might, not necessarily, but you might be losing the right to pass the course. So, and the important thing is that the assignment, as we said, is 65%. And the final assignment, the key to have a good final assignment is to make a good regular work during the course. And this helps for people who have more difficulty to understand the theory, right? Making an acceptable assignment is not difficult at all, right? And just the assignments and attendance are 50% of the score. So really the course is designed for it to be easy to pass. Not so easy to have an A+. You need to work a bit, but to pass is not so much. Important thing, some people have some circumstances. We are in 5th year, so some people may have job interviews, hospitalization that happened, medical conditions, whatever. Please be immediate and clear. Sometimes people speak to me something ambiguous I don't understand, and they keep failing, and suddenly they have some condition we didn't know, and it was too late to correct. So please document, give proof of whatever issue you have, and explain it as clear and as fast as possible. And some people had not this kind of things, but graduation circumstances. Some people, I see some students from 2012, so last chance, probably you're too long time. You need to improve grades for job finding. You need special reports to study abroad, or whatever. If you're in that circumstance, say it today, tomorrow. Not go to the final day of the evaluation to say, I need to have better grades because I cannot do anything. If you need some specific grade, I can work with you during the semester to help you push the grade where you need, right? Or just to pass if you are in the brink. And we had cases in which people could pass in a difficult situation, but they could pass and they could end and graduate. But please be honest and say at the beginning, not at the end, trying to have just some emotional discourse, trying to convince me to raise the grade in a way which is not actually totally forbidden in the school. Let's see the previous years, and it has to do with the environment, but also with the class, and we're almost finishing. So this is, I think, the 10th year, 2022. From 2020, we had only online, so that kind of changes. But curiously, we had 26 years alternating underground and class with Windows. And independently of the number of students, always the exam was much better in class with Windows than in underground classes. Curiously, this is only the exam, right? Then the assignments you do at home and you prepare things, so that doesn't include the whole course. But really the satisfaction, the scores you give at the end, is independent. Also, probably one of the worst years, this is the worst year ever, had a very good reply by the students, right? Another thing which is interesting, we had 2014, nobody failed, and 2020, nobody failed, our first course online. Last year, we had some fails. I see 6 people retaking, but of those 6, at least 2 want to improve the result, which I appreciate, so good luck with it. Only 1 really failed, and 3 just gave up at the end, probably too overwhelmed with the design. This is a pity because probably all those 3 could have passed, right? But so we had like 6 fails, but in those circumstances, actually, well, I hope all of you have an acceptable grade. It's not difficult, and please, those of you who had retaken, if you see some difficulty, contact me so I can work on that. The question is that the only year we had no exams was the worst evaluation ever, right? Only the first year of class, people were shocked because this course was difficult and they thought it would be easy. And then, but non-exam was a bad idea. And this is why in 2019, I decided we will have always exams. The number of students had some influence on the results, but were not actually, you will see there's not a correlation between number of students or not. Only, obviously, the best class ever had only 30 students, right? And the best satisfaction. 30 students is a great number for a class. We are about twice that. But what we can do is what we have. Now we are almost 60, about the largest classes we have ever. So since 2019, we are in the 60s, which is quite a large group, right? But let's see what happens. Yeah. The things are totally open. Only another comment, when the exam is very low, which is curious because people think online there's a lot of cheating because you're at home and you have everything around. But either you are very good at faking difficulty and really cheating, or really there's not so much more cheating, at least online than offline, because the exams were not so great. If the average of the exam is very low, I raise the averages a little bit, right? So there is not such a disaster. This is the relative part of the grading. Well, this is just for you to see, even in one photo, the difference. Just imagine you are in the room in the left and then you go to the room in the right, right? Even if the light level is mostly, well, it's quite similar. Of course, with the natural light, you have a much more light on the side, but the left side of the class is more or less similar. Just looking at it gives a very different feeling, right? And it's not having the view, because we usually cover the curtains to be able to see the projector. I say that because when you design spaces for people, wherever people have to do some activity, it is a good idea you have natural light. It can be top light, can be windows, natural light. For some reason, our mind works much better than with the best artificial light in the world. One thing that our school does not agree with, and they keep doing classrooms underground, because it is a way to have more efficient use of the space. Just to end, I will go fast into your opinion, into opinions of your seniors. And you know, for every positive opinion, there's a negative opinion. It is impossible to have everybody happy. So I had over the years quite positive comments, and this is something I appreciate. It is class difficult, but you understand a lot of things, right? I should have learned architectural detail instead of the 3D. Well, 3D is something you learn, but it's just a tool. It's not the architecture itself. You have not to confuse sometimes the tool with the object of your study. The assignments were quite practical and helpful, right? And helped to understand building systems with composing, with designing. And I think it is nice to see that students see the positive side of what we have been talking the whole session, trying to understand that those technical issues are part of the project, not something you add later. But there's also negative vision. It was useless, unclear, too much, too difficult. So it's too much. Maybe everybody agree with this. This is quite an interesting way of making critics, right? Try to, it's not myself, it is everybody. When you receive critics of that way, you have to think the problem is the one criticizing, right? Because obviously everybody is not thinking like that. Fortunately, I can see the whole critics, and it's not a majority of people, but it is not myself, it's everybody. Well, but it's interesting to see that. Cannot say it's not effective. Fifth-year students have too many things to do. To get a job? Yes, I agree. And one of the things you have to do is to learn, right? And to really, really improve your confidence on what you know and what you're able. Many lectures were not clear. I have been working on clarity over the years, right? But it would be helpful that you say on the spot what is not clear, and that helps. Because this is not helping. That means that some lectures were clear, others not, but I cannot work much on that. It was very hard class, and I had no concentration. Well, if I didn't have a concentration, I get lost. Well, that's true, but that happens with anything difficult, right? When you're in a class, and we reduced lecture time to 1 hour, 15 minutes, you have to concentrate. You're adult, you're in a university, you're in a top university of the world, and you're supposed to be able to concentrate and to follow difficult talk. But well, negative comments help also to improve. Going over the years, well, it's very well planned, appropriate, and very satisfied. I like to hear it. But for every positive opinion, it's the opposite. The planning is terrible. It's not a good educator, and it has to change the process a little bit. I don't know what this little bit maybe means a lot if I read with the Korean mind, right? But again, this is okay, but it's not helpful. Just only lets me know that people were not satisfied. But I need a bit more information to prove things, really. The purpose is to have things as clear to you and as useful as possible. Another positive, not easy, but very helpful. And I insisted not easy. If you find you do things which are very easy, either you're a super genius or you're doing something wrong, right? We come to university to do difficult things. And we are in a very difficult major. You're in a 5th year. So difficulty is obvious, right? Nobody is proud of doing easy things. When you are able to overcome one difficulty and you're successful with it, you have a sense of satisfaction. You're proud of it. You enjoy it, right? And this was kind of a positive, right? It was not easy, but it's helpful. So you have to overcome the difficulty. If you just get stuck in the difficulty and give up, you only understand difficulty. But when you overcome and you fight against that difficulty, you really understand many things and you become much better. And I like to hear this. I'm always open to you and glad to give feedback all the time. Well, as much as I can, of course. I have many things to do, of course, but this is my job. So please ask and ask difficult things, right? And I will help as much as I can. But again, this is the counterpoint. Too difficult, I don't try. Here I try, but sometimes I don't try. Well, I don't know. I'm very stubborn. Well, I'm stubborn. I'm Central Spanish. Spanish are stubborn. Not as much as many other, but yeah, I'm stubborn. But difficult, I agree, things are difficult. Inefficient, I don't know why so much insistence on efficiency, right? Life is about efficiency, of course, but sometimes learning is not efficient. It is very, very hard work, and you have to work with it. One comment about the exams, and this was a minority, but it existed, right? So there was some positive feedback. There was no exam, so we could concentrate more on the assignments on the class and have the presentation works. Some people thought it's positive, but most of the class said we need exams, right? Without exams, there was little attention in class and too much stress put on assignments. I think maybe this is a cultural thing. We are in the kingdom of exams. Korea is a culture of examination for everything. And probably we need a balance between exams and practice. The balance was a little bit shifted towards the practice, towards the assignments, because all the reasons I said before, but without exams, it didn't work. And you saw the statistics. It was the worst year ever. And well, this was about my attitude, right? So enthusiastic, well organized. I like to hear this, right? Content is a bit large. We cannot do, right? I'm greedy about what you want to learn. I always heard that if you have to learn this, right? And I teach you this, in the end, you get only that. But if you have to learn this and I teach all that, maybe in the end, you get the purpose. And this is a philosophy which is quite old-fashioned, but kind of works. And the management of the students were okay, but some people see me very mean. Well, and it's interesting because students are not really polite in my class. I would think when people ask me about Korean students with curiosity, one of the positive points, which there are many positive points, one positive point I said at the beginning is they are really polite, at least on the front, right? The back, I know. We know how students work. But please be polite, right? But it doesn't mean you have to be so sarcastic. Well, that's also cultural, right? And I think Korean is quite sarcastic culture also. I try not to be hurting, right? This is also cultural. Spanish are sarcastic, same as stubborn. But sometimes it's so easy to be sarcastic. And it is positive, you just try to deal with it, because we should not be so arrogant as to avoid critics. But we have just 5 seconds left. So I will tell you, just give me 30 more seconds in the class. My final, well, the teaching good or bad, well, this positive, negative about the online. I will go back a little bit because the YouTube was a very good addition. If we go offline, we cannot, it will be difficult to record and put in YouTube all the lectures, right? But obviously this a lack in the online, and I wish we go offline soon. This is something you may know because I show it in materials, but this came from building systems. Conclusion, the best. I like this, like the Korean University Hospital, the best and the only, right? Best, and when I forget the best. But there was also people in which the worst. And the worst ever, I don't want to see you forever. This is like the harshest critic, like whatever. So it is nice to have this balance, and I hope this guy didn't meet me ever. But you know, the experience is made by yourself. The course is the same, I'm the same. And well, depends mostly on you. That said, if there's not a question, I see we already 1 minute over the class. I will not take attendance today. That's kind of a presentation class. Tomorrow, attendance will be with a small online survey. You can send questions on the chat or by email, and I can reply tomorrow. You can say goodbye in the chat. Tomorrow, we have lecture 1. That said, you're free to go. Thank you so much for attending to the end. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.